disease which is very prevalent in the United States is atrial fibrillation. Up to a third of people over age 75 have atrial fibrillation. The main problem with atrial fibrillation is that clots can form in the left atrium, specifically in the left atrial appendage. And it's estimated between 75,000 and 100,000 strokes a year are related to atrial fibrillation. As a result of that, people are treated with Coumadin and with other oral 10A inhibitors to try to minimize the risk of stroke. But the problem is that many people develop complications with Coumadin or the 10A inhibitors, and so other ways of preventing stroke risk with AFib are being looked at. Now there has been a field developed where left atrial appendage exclusion or left atrial appendage ligation is being performed so that people don't have to be on anticoagulant therapy. The leader in this is a Boston Scientific product called the Watchman. It's a device that sits in the left atrial appendage and occludes the left atrial appendage so that clots can't form and embolize. There have been 2 trials that have been done with the Watchman, and as a result of that, there have been 2 panel meetings that the FDA had for approval of the device. The original panel meeting, there was a concern about a risk of serious adverse events. So when you put the Watchman inside in the original trial, there were some patients that developed tamponade or other serious adverse events. A very small number of patients. It was in the learning curve of the device, but the FDA still didn't feel safe with approval. So they required a second trial that was done, a larger study with follow-up, and they had a second panel meeting, and Watchman met most of the endpoints, and actually the panel voted for approval of the Watchman. The FDA decided not to approve and actually has required a third panel meeting. That third FDA panel meeting is happening in November, and it's tough to see how they could deny approval. The device is proven to be very safe and very durable, and the 4-year data now looks like it looks better than Coumadin for preventing stroke. So I think that it's likely that it's going to be approved in November, and then hopefully it will be available for sale in the United States the first quarter of next year. There's a long history of concern by the FDA over chronic implantable devices. I mean, and there's, you know, the Bjork-Shiley valve had late failures, and the IUD devices had late failures. So the FDA is really allergic to chronic durable implants. In the early days with the original device that was made, that went into called a Plato product, the original left atrial appendage device was taken off, or never got to the market because there were late embolizations that actually resulted in patient deaths. If the device embolizes from the left atrium, it'll go out into the left ventricle. It could occlude the aortic valve, could embolize into the aorta and cause very severe adverse consequences. So I think the FDA just really wanted more safety data. And that's really why they've been a little reluctant to approve this device. The other thing is that the devices that go sit inside these chambers can cause erosion. So there have been reports of late erosion of ASD closure devices, and so I think they were worried about that. So, I mean, I can kind of understand their caution. I think they've been overly cautious, and I think actually more lives will be saved by decreasing the side effects of Coumadin therapy. But that's my guess as to why they've been late. There's plenty of data now. The devices are now widely used in Europe, and I think it's time that the U.S. patients have access to them. I think the devices are actually going to be very widely used. They're really pretty safe to put in. It really doesn't take a lot of time. And once physicians get experience with it, and once patients realize that they don't need anticoagulants, I think that will be a very large group of patients that will be treated. Again, a lot of it is just like the mitral clip. The use is going to be held down until a reimbursement pattern is established and until hospitals feel as though that they will be paid adequately for putting in the devices. So there isn't going to be like a wild, widespread adoption. It'll be slow, but over time I think it's going to be a huge number of patients that are treated. I honestly think that there'll be more left atrial appendage devices planted than TAVR valves implanted within 5 years.